Okay, good. Hey, well, anyway, we're at the top of the hour. I want to welcome all of you to the Jesus Central webinar. It's good to have all of you with us. And tonight we have a special topic. We're going to be talking about neighboring during disasters. And obviously, with a lot of hurricanes that have been happening recently, with Harvey down in Houston, we saw Irma in Florida and through the Caribbean. And then now with Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands with Maria and the devastation we've seen there, that this really seemed like a good topic for us to focus on is just what do we, we're definitely going to stay off of Facebook. I tried doing that again, and that's not going to work. So just anyway, so what we're doing, actually, this is a great night is, I don't know if you guys know, this is National Good Neighbor Day. And not only would you both be wonderful neighbors that I would love to be by and hang out all the time as we get to do tonight, but tonight it really lends to the topic that we're talking about is neighboring during disasters. And so we have two individuals who I really value and appreciate their ministry. We have Greg Finke with Dwelling 114, and we have David Kim with Glocal Missions, and both are in Houston, Texas. Have weathered Hurricane Harvey and have many stories to tell. And so thank you both for being here tonight as we get going. One of the things I like to do with this webinar is start off with a question, maybe give us a little background about both who you are. Especially David, we don't know you as well on this webinar, so we want to make sure we get a chance to get to know you. Tell us a little bit about your ministry that you do. And then the question I ask, and let me textify this again for you, Greg. Would you like to ask, how's Jesus messing with you? I ask, what's Jesus been stirring in your heart lately? Basically the same thing. So a bit about who you are, your ministries, and what's Jesus been stirring in your heart. Who would like to go first tonight?
I think, David, you should go first.
Why don't you start off, David?
Okay, this is David Kim, and for those who have never met me, originally I'm from South Korea. Then before coming to USA, I have been mission planter or church planter and cross-cultural missionary in South America for 12 years in Ecuador, and then came to USA. In USA, mainly I have been working cross-culturally with different ethnic leaders and multi-ethnic communities. Both in California, here in Houston. I used to be mission director at Link Houston. Right now, currently, I'm full-timely just dedicated with Glocal Mission as a non-profit separate mission organization under Texas district. And so what we do is basically reaching the lost and discipling the found, and multiplying disciple makers and churches. So we try to do the new church planting through the discipleship making kind of effort, very intentionally here locally in Houston metropolitan area, and also around USA and beyond in different nations in Africa, in Asia, and also in America.
Excellent, excellent. And so, David, let me just ask you, what's Jesus been stirring in your heart lately?
Whatever, kind of communities or nations or churches crisis is a great opportunity for the church, for the believers, for the followers of Jesus, so that we can stand up and speak and on behalf of the Lord, on behalf of God. I know that it has been very tough season and interrupted by many different messy situations here around in Houston. But at the same time, I could be able to sense and see and grasp as a great opportunity how I can interact with the people and provide the pastoral care, and at the same time, the message of hope through Jesus Christ.
That's excellent. Excellent. Well, David, thank you for being with us. And Greg, just a little bit about you and your ministry and how's Jesus been messing with you?
Yeah. Well, we lead Dwelling 114. We go around to congregations or clusters of congregations that are, really interested in becoming much more intentional and consistent about discipling their people to join Jesus on his mission in their local community. We're going to Little Rock, Arkansas this weekend. We were in Michigan. We've been in California, Iowa, just all over the place, Nebraska. So we just go wherever people are willing and ready, and really help them enter into a process of experiencing, not just thinking about considering, but participating and experiencing how this can happen in their everyday lives. So what Jesus has been messing with me about lately, I think it's really a growing thing. We're into our 7th year of doing this, and we were certainly convinced of this early on, but even more so now, that the people of God, and that includes me, but the people of God really, we are very well trained in considering what God gives us to do. What we really need to do is start moving towards participating in what God gives us to do. The thinking about it is great, but it is not what we're ultimately, that does not complete what God is asking of us to think about it or to memorize it. I like to jokingly say, we as Lutherans have the "what does this mean for us" thing down. We need to add to that, "what if he means this?"
Yes.
And actually put it into play. But I think just like with, I think David was indicating, in this time of great need, neighborhood to neighborhood, neighbor to neighbor, boy, if the people of God could just step in and actually give action to their love, we would see a great benefit to the people of our community as well as across the country. Absolutely.
Yeah. You said that in actuality, one time when I asked my wife to marry her, I asked her father for her hand in marriage, and he said, "I agree in principle." Now, when you're asking for a hand in marriage, that's not what you're going for is in principle. It's in actuality. And I think a lot of times we agree for mission in principle, but I think what Jesus is wanting us to do is join him in actuality as well.
Yeah.
Good. Hey, well, gentlemen, so we've been watching, I think many of us on television, we've really been at a distance watching the disaster. And I know that it moved people with compassion and in action, and yet it's not the same as actually living it and especially what has happened in the weeks and months afterwards. Tell us a little bit about what this experience had been like for both of you personally with Hurricane Harvey there in Houston.
Greg, would you go first?
Well, I can. So Houston, we get rain a lot. Getting 10, 15 inches of rain in a 24-hour period is not unusual. So when we saw that Hurricane Harvey was supposed to come in much further down the coast, my wife and I, we were committed to a Dwelling 114 training, and we made the decision to go ahead and keep that, because the prediction at that point was 20 inches of rain over 3 or 4 days. No problem. Houston handles that all the time.
Right.
The day before we were to depart, though, my wife really was just uneasy, and I finally just said, "Susan, do you want to just stay?" And she's like, "You know what? I think I do." And I said, "Well, Susan, you can't really stop a storm or a flood or a hurricane." She said, "Yes, but I can keep my eye on it," which is typical Susan kind of a thing. So anyway, we made the decision again for her to stay and I to go, thinking it would be, it would be a storm, but nothing close. We instead of it being 20 inches, it was 51 inches, at least in our part of the city. I just heard today that near Beaumont, there's a community called Nederland, and they had 64 inches of rain over 5 days.
That's amazing.
Which is the most rainfall with any one storm system in U.S. history.
Wow.
So that is just the scope of this that is amazing. And for us, it was scary because it was just unrelenting rain for so many days. It got close to getting into our home. It did not get into our home. but that has freed us up to go and help others that were adversely affected by the floodwaters. So it was scary, but in the end, what made the huge difference was our faith, of course, but also we had been cultivating authentic friendships with our neighbors, and throughout that ordeal, they were hanging together, texting each other, encouraging each other, sharing information as they heard it. When we had 15 inches of rain in a 3-hour period, early Sunday morning. So at 2:30 in the morning, all the neighbors went out into our cul-de-sac. The water was up to anywhere from the middle of their thighs up to their waists.
Wow.
Just to be able to go, hey, we made it. Because at that point, the water had started receding. It had come up to literally up to the door of everybody on the cul-de-sac, and it had started to recede, and they came out to, at 2:30 in the morning to celebrate with each other. So yeah, a combination of scariness, but of neighboring and ultimately faith. But we would never want to do it again. That's for sure.
Yeah, I could imagine. Wow. David, how about for you? What was that like for you guys personally going through Hurricane Harvey?
Actually has been, their facility has been flooded and devastated, and also several members' houses and completely flooded, and they got lost, literally everything they had. And so still kind of struggling right now, even after almost 3 weeks in rebuilding process. So it's very stressful when you see your loved ones, your own kind of churches that you are supervising kind of gone through that kind of situation. It's not somebody else's story. It now becomes my story, my burden, my stress, and how we can stay together in the midst of this kind of crisis. And so, but at the same time, we cannot solve the problem of everyone. It's just, we are focusing one at a time, one person, one family, one community, one church at a time, because it's overwhelming. Somehow it's overwhelming. I don't want to hear any more kind of stories, because it's scary. Because I myself feel like I cannot help anymore, but just immediate needs, and those families and churches surrounded me. Even in the areas, there are several Lutheran pastors, my colleague pastors, and their houses have been flooded literally. So it's kind of painful that seeing and observing and reading their posts and everyday update. Still, it's a long-term process. So those who have been in a comfort situation now going through completely discomfort, and at the same time, those who have been in our own control, we could be able to manage certain things, but now it doesn't work. We have to rely upon the Lord, how it goes. And so that's kind of a new experience, new journey, and something that I realized that I cannot handle. And we need to humble ourselves, and we need day by day again, Lord, we need you. What to do about, because there's no quick or easy answer to the situation that many people are going through.
Yeah.
Travis,
please,
we got word, speaking of some of the pastors that David was referring to, one pastor up on the north side of town, the flood waters got up. They had a 2-story home, and it got up to the 2nd floor. Wow. So deep was the water, and it actually eroded the land underneath their foundation, so that their house is a total loss. That's just one example of many, and just kind of a specific kind of description of what David's talking about.
Wow. And David, that one person from your ministry, what's their status right now?
By God's grace and many kind of either area congregation or from afar, many even unknown congregation came alongside, and also Texas District responded to my personal request on behalf of the congregation. So we could be able to at least, immediately taking some process, but still long process to rebuild and fix everything. But by God's grace, we are planning out little by little, one step at a time. But by God's grace, people are in calm, and they are taking, with the calmness, with and everything kind of, they are facing it well. At the same time, they try to help many of their own neighborhood. That has been very, very huge blessing, even to many people who have known them, because you are in the same situation, but still, as church, as God's people, trying to help other people first,
Yeah.
and receiving the resources so that they can share with others. That has been huge blessings, and we have wonderful story because of that kind of kindness they showed, the generosity they showed by sharing with their own neighbors. Several families actually within these 3 weeks, period, could be able to join into the local congregation.
Wow. Wow. Over the summer, I did a lot of work on reading on Luther's doctrine of vocation, and he really talks about that vocation, our callings of life, are really all about loving and serving our neighbor. And it's amazing that sometimes we forget that calling, both just because we don't know God's plan in our life, but sometimes even as believers. But it's moments like this, disasters, that are ways that we wake up to that reality that, oh yeah, there are neighbors in need, and that's our calling. It's to love and serve them. That's part of God's design for human relationships. And even to the point where, I've got a lot of friends in Houston too. I lived there back in the 90s as a director of Christian education, and hearing the stories. And I have one friend in particular, she says it's amazing, just neighbor helping neighbor. And she is seeing rarely people complaining and just going out of the way to serve. Even to one time she went to a store, and the shelves were pretty empty at that time because of the floods, and supplies couldn't come in. And the one gentleman saw what she was looking for and says, "Oh, by the way, I have that at home. I could drive home and get that for you." I mean, just really remarkable, people going out of their way and loving and serving one another in ways that you normally wouldn't see. But that kind of leads me to my next question I want to ask you guys. So what have been the opportunities that have been opened to be the presence of Jesus, to join him in mission in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey and the weeks that followed?
Yeah, well, for me, and I think I already heard David alluding to it, really we talk about the ministry of presence a lot, but this is a great opportunity to say, holy cow, there is a power to that, just showing up, being there, sweating, helping, tearing out, but also being willing to sit with people and just ask them the story, what happened, and just being present with them is incredibly redemptive. And then being willing to talk with them about a little bit of hope, a little bit of faith. Well, what have they learned about life, and about ask them if they have a faith in God. And often in these situations, like one guy we were talking with, his wife was talking with us, and she had just a few days before the flood had been talking with her husband about how she really wanted him to step up and be more of a leader in their home. They have teenage boys and so forth. They were first generation immigrants. They had lived in New Jersey, but now they had moved to Houston about 14 months ago. And he told me this, and I said, well, what has this taught you? And he's like, I'm ready to be a man of God. Wow. And we were able to pray right there. But I asked 3 questions, I think, and just was present. And I think that's what I'm learning, even though we already knew that. But loving your neighbor is often just being there with them and being willing to not be in a hurry, not have an agenda, not have to get to your own point, but invite them to trust and to talk and to open up. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
Wow. And that image too, there's something that struck me of what you said, was the idea of not just the presence, but sweating, and thinking of the body of Christ sweating, that Jesus sweat, and we sweat when we are serving in those moments. David, what about for you? What have you been seeing as far as joining Jesus on his mission, being the presence of Christ in the situations that you have been witness to in the aftermath?
Yeah, for instance, one of our pastors lived in southwest area where all the surrounded freeways actually were flooded and there was no
Mm.
access. And he couldn't get out of his own community. And
Wow.
basically, and so many people kind of tried to reach it through the 911, but on those first week, actually 911 couldn't even respond. Everybody calling, and it was kind of mass. It has been mass situation. So actually, they created through the social media like Facebook within their own community, kind of who are living here, who are actually church goers, and interchanging their information. All of a sudden, those who are living in that community could be able to gather together in one house while they get out of their own community, but at the same time kind of becoming one, yeah, among all neighbors. And regardless of even the pastor, he's kind of more second gen Hispanic. He said literally all people came, actually all Caucasians and also black people, all kinds of people who gathered, and they didn't know even that they were living there. They never shared each other, and they didn't even know they were kind of churchgoers or believers. So they could be able to join, and in the midst of kind of scary crisis that they are in that place that they cannot get out of that community, and in danger of that kind of crisis, but coming together and praying and interceding for the community or for the city and creating a new neighborhood and kind of being church in the midst of the crisis. Before, many of them didn't know each other, even though they are believers. Everybody belongs to different churches, different denominations. But for the first time, gathering in a house and actually being a church. So even to that pastors, it was very unique experience. He said, this is the church. This is to be actually followers of Jesus, not only by going a local church, but actually coming together. We are, located.
So as horrible as the disaster was, and I'm sure nobody would have wished that came, yet the power of God working through that to break down barriers and bring people together, and to see movements of faith even start happening in the aftermath. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, Travis, we have been to dozens of homes, and probably of those dozens of homes, we've probably been in 10 different communities, and I would say at least 8 out of 10 of the people that we have been with, and in other words, most of these people, when there's at some point when I'm talking with them, and I'll say, what has this done for your neighborhood? That almost to the person, not every single one, but almost to the person, they say, before Harvey, we didn't really know our neighbors. Now we think of them as family.
Wow.
And again, it's just like David said, it's breaking through these our routines and our presumptions and just the normalcy of ignoring each other, politely, but ignoring each other nonetheless. And this required them to come together, and either everybody struggles individually or each of them comes together. And we had one elderly couple that actually is the parents of one of our immediate neighbors, and they had their home had flooded. They only lived literally about a half mile from us, and we had a celebration in our cul-de-sac on our street. It was 2 days after the storm passed, and it was just kind of a goofy ad hoc potluck because nobody had any food. We just had, like, somebody had an old thing of hot dogs and somebody else had some baked beans that they had. We just brought it, whatever we had out. And this elderly couple came in, and we invited them in and shared with them and found out that they had been hurting and that they had their home flooded. The very next day, all the guys from the neighborhood went over there and gutted their house And the man, when he was with us that night at the potluck, said, "Our neighbors don't do this for each other." By the time we left his house the next day, most of the neighbors had shown up and put sweat equity into helping them out. That man stood at his garage when we were leaving that day, and he literally was fighting back tears. He says, "Today, my neighbors we became neighborhood today."
Wow.
And it was just so cool to see it actually happening right there. He really was cynical that his neighborhood couldn't do this. He saw what we had in our neighborhood, and he's like, "My neighborhood can't do that." And then right before his eyes, they did, because they had a prompt, an excuse, a catalyst for it. It's too bad it took a disaster, but I guess our real work here is how can you in the Southeast District begin to cultivate this in your neighborhoods without having to have a catastrophic flood?
Yeah, it would be a lot easier to figure out an easy way to do that rather than it take a hurricane to club you over the head. And
yeah.
So let me ask you guys. Obviously, personally, some really kind of incredible experiences and somewhat terrifying for people friends and family and neighbors. But yet opportunities to see neighborhoods coming together and barriers being broken down and God moving and joining Jesus in that and being his hands and feet. How have you been surprised by God in this process? How has God surprised you? Let me start with David, and then we'll go to Greg. David, how's God surprised you in all this?
I was surprised when I remember there was immediate and overwhelming kind of needs of the resources and even the clean up stuffs and everything, because everybody is so chaotic. Everybody looking for some sort of resources, and I was wondering, and it was kind of after 2 days, and actually I was trying to get as much as supplies to help, sort out among all our mission churches so that they can help in their own respective neighborhoods with the cleaning up tasks. And in the midst of that crisis, I actually checked, on the webpage what kind of, resources could be available. And out of my desperation, even I checked the Red Cross. But when I saw the procedures so that you can apply and to get, I said, no, this is I need right now situation. I need to take longer process, and many people even were very pessimistic about, they are gonna donate just renowned maybe organizations in neighborhoods. So I just turned down and I just prayed, Lord, would you please move any organization, including like Red Cross, if they have any surplus available resources, would you send to our end? And I remember kind of 2 days ago, prayed that way. Then after 2 days, while I have been helping and brought from a Texas district, we received some donations, so we have been unloading. And then showed up another church from another church, which is not even Lutheran church, coming and dropping something. That was surprising. And after that, actually passing by a Red Cross truck with full of supplies, and accidentally they were coming back and saw the church facility, and they entered and they were asking us if we would need it, clean up stuff and everything, the supplies. And we said yes. Then accidentally they just found us and unloaded the full of the supplies with a full truck. And I was, Lord, how I can arrange it like this? It is just kind of God thing at the right moment, at the right timing. And they were surprised and we were surprised. And I was, Lord, I know why this happened, but wow, this is awesome.
So God has the ability to take away red tape.
Yeah.
How about for you, Greg?
Well, I think two brief things. One was, as I'm in the trenches, mucking out houses, it was apparent to me that the vast majority of the people that were there sweating alongside me, masks over their faces, covered with sawdust, etc., or I shouldn't say sawdust, drywall dust, that the vast majority of them were followers of Jesus. And then I heard it widely reported by secular media within days of Harvey departing that of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that were volunteering, they had determined that 80% of them were faith-based, and so 80%. That's it shouldn't be amazing, because that should be our sweet spot as the people of God, but it was still good to hear. The other thing, a little more on the little less, broadly speaking, what has really surprised me, and it shouldn't, but it did anyway, is how God really has prepared people for the, so in other words, John 4, open your eyes and look, the fields are ripe for harvest. And as we went into, like I said, dozens of homes, probably 10 different communities, how they were ready to speak about things of faith. It was just remarkable. I mean, we didn't just come rolling in and begin with that, but it was just amazing how quickly it turned to that, and usually by the people themselves with their conversation. And it just, if we open our eyes, we'll see, open our ears, we'll hear. And a lot of times, in the when there's not these kinds of hard pressed situations around us, people are busy, they're distracted, they're zoned in on whatever they have to get done. But it's during these times where people are shook that kind of falls away, and they're able to talk about more deep things than they usually are. And it was just amazing how the fields really are ripe for harvest. Anyway, and we just need more workers in the harvest field, I guess, which is exactly what Jesus said.
Yeah. Sorry, we lost David here, so I'm texting him real quick to see what happened, if we can get him back on air. But yeah, that's really remarkable to hear those statistics of 80% being followers of Jesus, being out there serving. What a testimony to what the church is all about, that as Jesus has come and loved and served us, that he took up his cross and followed, that so many followers of his would do the same in loving and serving their neighbors. And that has to speak volumes so David said he lost a signal. He'll try to reconnect, having trouble. So we'll continue the conversation until we can get David back online. Real fast, while we're waiting to see if we can get David. Greg, you were surprised in a personal way. You had mentioned, I think, in a post or something, or personally, about going out and being loving and serving neighbors, and your grass was long. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. So, we went out, we leave every morning. There's a local church that's doing an outstanding job of organizing volunteers and vetting the needs and getting, the hands and feet of Jesus to the folks that need it the most. So we would just, show up every morning. You show up at 8 o'clock. They give you an address. You get hooked up with a team, and you go out, and usually by noon or 1 o'clock, we'd have one house done, and then they'd send us out to the next one. And usually by 4:30, we'd be done with the second one. But all that to say, by the time we were done with that day, we were pretty whooped, and we'd come rolling back into the neighborhood, and we'd fall out of the car. We're all sweaty and dusty and looking pretty bad, and the last thing I wanted to do was mess around with mowing my stupid yard. And one day we come rolling back into our neighborhood, drive in, and I get out of the car, and at first it didn't even hit me, and then I'm looking, I'm like, well, for heaven's sakes, my grass is cut. What in the world's going on? And quickly found out that a freshman in high school who lives up the block, he has asthma, and he can't be around mold. It's very dangerous for him. But so he decided he couldn't go out and help, so he was going to help someone that was helping the people. And I said, wow, man, well, thank you so much. You shouldn't have done that. And he's like, no, I wanted to help you because you're helping others. And I'm like, man, you have blessed me. His name is Ty, and his little brother helped too, I know, but I think it was mostly Ty. And for a freshman in high school to do that, I got to let you know, when I was a goofy freshman in high school, I'm not sure I would have had the depth of character to even think of that. If somebody told me to go do it, I'd have done it. But
Right.
to come up with it on my own, I don't think I would have. So it was just very cool.
That's really a cool story of you being out there blessing others and then somebody blessing you, and just how God's love works. So, Greg, let me ask you this question. So, there's been a lot of opportunities to love and serve neighbors, but you also have been investing in loving and serving your neighbors long before this hurricane hit.
Mm-hmm.
How did the investment of seeking to connect with your neighbors and bless them and be present with them open up opportunities afterwards? What was the fruit that came from what you did before to then what happened after the hurricane?
Yeah. Well, and I would even say, before, there's the what happened afterwards. There is an amazing fruit during scary times that I think Americans generally don't even realize we're doing without. There was a huge difference between going through this disaster alone versus going through this disaster with 8 sets of friends that were nearby. This is our second hurricane since we've been in Houston. Our first one was a year after we got here, Hurricane Ike in 2008. And I often harken back to that because when it was clear that the hurricane was coming right up through Galveston and was going to hit us right in the chops, we literally had a gang of guys going from house to house, putting up all the hurricane panels. And I can just let you know that would have been very full of anxiousness and fear had it been each one fending for himself. But because we were neighbors, because we knew each other, because we cared for each other, it turned into more this team effort that was incredibly comforting, even in the midst of great anxiety. So fast forward several years, and we've had some people move out, some people move in, but the general tenor of the neighborhood is still the same. And so as this is happening, there is an extra set of calmness, of peace, of those are 2 good words that was in the neighborhood because we know each other, could trust each other, could count on each other. That's really important. Then the fruit of it afterwards is, again, we've been investing in not just the relational, but the spiritual as well. And to be able to talk so blatantly, so openly about our relationship with Christ and our sense of thanks and turning to Him in our trouble. I mean, like David said before, this could have been a house church, just because of that investment. So this it wasn't a catalyst to start this; it was a catalyst that revealed it, because we already had been investing in that. And again, we do this with congregations all over the country, so I know we're not unique. It's just a matter of taking the time to get to know and spend some time. Like we've started to say, if you can share a meal, share some stories, share some laughs, that's the best way to get into a position to be neighbors, to be neighborhood, and to join Jesus on His mission.
That's awesome. So it sounds like there was a lot of fruit that already was happening of trust that had been developed, spiritual sharing, that only then when the hurricane happened, you were already together to support each other and just deepened that experience in what happened afterwards.
Yes. Now, the elderly couple that I spoke of earlier, the parents of one of our neighbors who kind of wandered in because they were staying at their kid's house because their house was, they couldn't stay in it. They wandered into our, impromptu potluck. And I've been talking with them now as they've gone on. And he said they've had neighbors come over and offer to pray with them. They've had neighbors that have spoken with them. He said, my faith was just, he's a Vietnam vet. He suffers from PTS, the post-traumatic stress syndrome. He's been struggling in his faith for many years. He said, I have been avoiding the pain by being a workaholic. He said, my faith has come alive, he said. And it's not just because of what he experienced with us in this neighborhood, but because other people of God were, the disaster had been a catalyst for them to reach out and offer the things that they could have offered previously, but they were busy. They didn't know each other very well, all that. But now that kind of spiritual fabric is being woven now in that neighborhood as well.
Wow.
Very cool to be able to see from a bit of a distance of about a half mile.
That's exciting. Wow. It's so incredible to hear that fruit that's starting to happen, that had been happening, but now starting to see it happen in other places, and the connections that are being broadened as well. That's really exciting. So Greg, another question I wanted to ask you and David. Hopefully we'll get David on soon. He lost signal, so hopefully we'll get him back on before the end of the broadcast. But let me ask you this: from your experience, what would be helpful to keep in mind about being God's blessing to one's neighbor when disasters hit in community? What kind of things, as those who are watching or going to be watching after this, should be in mind when disaster happens?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think if I am thinking it through, the thing that people need immediately is physical help, right? So to come in with spiritual help, not being willing to roll up your sleeves, not being willing to, put on a face mask and sweat, I think would not be well received. But I do know that when you get in there and you get dirty and you're working hard and you're sweating and you're making progress together, that then is the thing that then, I don't know, connects them. There's appreciation, there's affection even, but then the spiritual conversations can happen. And again, I'm not saying anything that probably folks wouldn't do anyway, but I really would say sequentially, come in with your hammer and your pry bar, with your reciprocating saw to cut out the drywall, get dirty, get dusty, sweat, and then during the breaks, ask how they're doing, right? During the lunch time, invite them to tell what it was like when they saw the water coming in, and then the spiritual conversations tend to just flow, even though they may not even realize those are spiritual conversations, but they are, and you do know that, and the conversation very quickly can turn to hope and redemption and prayer. We prayed with every single family that we were able to help muck out, just because it was the next way to help them.
Yeah,
we'd speak with them, we talked with them, and then the praying with them was very well received.
Yeah, that's awesome. A few things from what you said. I remember one time hearing a statement that people don't care to hear what you have to say until they know how much you care. Mm-hmm. And to be able to show that yes, we are the voice of Jesus, but we also are the hands and the feet of Jesus. And whether that's using tools of the kingdom, which I don't think we often think of, but hammer and saw and nail, or be the arms of Jesus that provides a hug and a care during times of disaster, to be able to be the feet of Jesus, to go to them in those times, that just gives the authenticity then to the gospel and the words that we speak.
Yep. So I was just speaking, from an individual standpoint there. From a congregational standpoint, I've been very impressed with one of the local congregations, and it's really a great model of utilizing the body of Christ, because there's different gifts, there's different abilities, there's different physical limitations that people bring to the table. And this particular church, they had a bunch of different teams. So they had teams of people that could go out and assess. So there were folks that had some experience with this. They maybe had some experience with contracting and building. And they were able to go out and kind of do a triage. They were able to say, who are the elderly, who are the single parents, who are the physically handicapped, and they went to the top of the list. And then other folks were still on the list, but they were further down. But they were able to say, these are the homes that need the most help first. Then you had people that were often the what they called, I think they called them the connecting people, and they were the ones that were going to be the ongoing interaction with the homeowner. So they were the ones that would come in just ahead of the actual team of people that were going to come in and muck out the house, and they'd introduce themselves, and they would be in conversation with them, and then they would talk with them. Hey, David.
Hello.
They would continue that conversation well after the house was mucked out, so they weren't just helped while it was in process, but in an ongoing way. And then there was all the busy beavers that were willing to help, but just needed to know where to go, what to do.
Yeah.
And so there would be those kind of the foreman of the job, and then all the people willing to come in and usually with each of those teams, there would be somebody that might be a little more elderly, that they really shouldn't be in there, tearing out drywall or taking out counters or what, or, cabinets or whatever. But they were often the ones that were able to be there and kind of just gently ask the homeowner, what are some things that you would rather have us avoid? What are some things that you want us to try and be careful with? In other words, there was something for everybody to do, and I really appreciated how they just thought that through. And no matter who you are, if you're willing to serve, they would find a way for you to serve, and really have the homeowner as the center of that. We weren't doing this because we needed to help. We were going in and finding out how we could help.
Yeah.
And that was really, really simple but important difference.
Yeah, and sometimes being organized like that and understanding how do we utilize God's gifts to be a blessing during times of disaster, it can just happen. I've also wondered sometimes, should there be some advanced planning? Like, what if, when we were in California, living in San Francisco and LA, I was always asking the question, what would happen if the big one hit? Do we have a plan? How would we care for our people? How would we care for our community? Do we have any sort of a kind of an action plan of how we would even approach that? And I think even having some preparedness thinking ahead of time might even be able to fast track that a little bit more.
Yes.
Hey, David, we want to get you. Welcome back. Good to have you back as well. Hey, we're talking about, from your experience, what would be helpful to keep in mind about being God's blessings to one's neighbor when a disaster hits? Just so, as congregations, suddenly a disaster hits, what are things to keep in mind, both individually and as a congregation, from what you're seeing in your experience that would be helpful to keep in mind?
Being more visible and being in the midst of the people. Sometimes we, as church, we should be functioning as salt and light. But to make that happen, we have to be actually being, and acting and serving, because that's where the outsiders can see visibly where the church are and why they are doing. And bottom line, they are going to ask at the end of the day, why you are coming to our side, and just, selflessly, you are trying to help us. And there is where we can, answer the reason why behind. So we can take that great opportunity, even though, regardless, we must be serving anyhow, anyway, as followers of Jesus. But the more we are, blessing and giving our presence in the midst of the needy people, then a better opportunity for us to share the gospel effectively.
Yeah, definitely. And probably that being present beforehand will help then when you're present afterwards as well. And so, I think sometimes we get a little too comfortable inside our church buildings, and it's wonderful being with Jesus, being with each other, but to realize there's a community we're called to, and remembering that we've got to intentionally be out there again, not just in theory, but in actuality, as you talked about, Greg, is really important to keep in mind.
Yes.
Yeah, Jesus kind of spoke of this very clearly when he said, "Don't just hear these words of mine, put them into practice."
Yeah.
That wasn't about just, trying to keep rules. That was about using our identity and the gifts of the kingdom that we have in abundance for the good of others. And that happens not just when we're coming to church, but as we get to go out and be church in the community that needs it so badly. And if all we have to sell, if all we have to give is a sales pitch on why you should join our religious club, then we have let them down.
Yeah.
But if we are willing to give them ourselves, our service, our listening ear, our sweat, our compassion, and to actually do that, then they'll be much more interested in hearing about the other things that might be a benefit of coming together as God's people in worship. But we're missionaries. We're not just sorting out who's going to go to what church. It's about helping, like David just said, being salt and light, and that's not just with words, but with action and in truth, as I think First John says.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, so we've got about 9 minutes left. And what I'd like to do is really try to answer a question I think a lot of people are asking, a lot of people are praying about, that yes, we are a little removed. Yes, life is kind of getting back to normal for some folks in Houston. I've got some friends who it sounds like that's happening for them. And yet, though, what we'd like to do is get an understanding, what is the need now? What's the need going to be in the next month or two, or even in a year? And what are practical ways right now that those who are looking, yes, maybe I've sent some dollars in, and maybe there's still an opportunity to do that, but I want to do something more. I want to help. I want to get involved. Tell us about that need and how can they get involved, and especially through your different ministries or other ministries you know of in Houston.
I'll go first. In my case, and most of during this 3 weeks period, most of the neighborhood that we know, at least they kind of went through the, cleaning up process. So most of the people right now actually asking more reconstruction or rebuilding, materials and helping hands in that regard. Still, people trying to come in and trying to, help in the cleaning up. But right now, actually, the most of the neighborhood cleaned up. So right now, everybody trying to, rebuild and reconstruct and recover. But most of some people can be done through the FEMA. Some people through the insurance. But there are so many still people who don't have any FEMA help or insurance coverage. And those people who are actually waiting for some sort of, materials to rebuild, insulations, and many reconstruction materials, and the helping hands. That's what they are needed. And even one of our pastors yesterday just checked that in a mobile home area, 50 houses flooded. Even right now, after 3 weeks, they are without electricity, and we utilizing just mobilizing, kind of public toilets and just families together in a tent is just horrible. And one of pastors said this is kind of third world situation he couldn't believe in right now in one of our neighborhood. So their needs is not like just cleaning up. Maybe the gift card, some donation, but also the construction materials. That's in this period of the rebuilding, reconstruction kind of process.
So people with carpentry skills, people with building skills really are in need right now.
Yeah, alongside with the construction material. We can
Awesome.
find the volunteers, but we don't have the materials, enough materials to help actually in a tangible way.
Okay, excellent. Greg, what are you seeing?
No, much the same thing. The people need to understand that Houston is extremely humid. So right after Harvey was out, people knew they had to hustle to get all the wet stuff out of their house, or not only mildew and mold, but black mold would quickly come over, and then your house is condemned. So the cleaning up part, everybody was very good about getting carpeting out, floorboards, drywall, all that. So to my knowledge, a lot of the disinfectant has also happened, where you come back through and you spray down all the surfaces and all the studs with stuff that will keep mold from forming. But yeah, now like David said, the construction materials and people that have some measure of skill, especially for people that don't have flood insurance, the FEMA money isn't going to be enough to rebuild. They're not going to be able to hire contractors. They're going to just need folks that are willing to come in and help. So really, I think a legitimate question is, who can somebody from another part of the country contact to be able to know who is a legitimate person that I can come with materials and help rebuild their home. In other words, put up drywall, put it back together again. And I know the Texas District has been trying very hard to organize that. I also know that there's a bit of a backlog of being able to find out who needs help and who wants to help. It's a little frustrating, not against Texas District at all, but just it's frustrating because there's so much need and so much willingness out there to put those together in an intelligent way is difficult. Like I said, I know we've been working with a local congregation here that's doing a great job, and they now are into that third phase, tearing out the wet stuff, disinfecting, and now starting to organize teams to go out and help put these things back together again. But I don't know, maybe David, do you know of a certainly the Texas District? Are there other entities? Does your organization have a way to connect willing people with folks that need help in reconstructing their homes?
Yeah, definitely. As long as we can match with our clients' needs and with their giftedness and what they can offer, what they can bring. Somehow, still people think we wouldn't need just cleaning stuff and trying to send like that. Most of people right now, we are after that stage. Right now is reconstruction stage, and so we would need more, not just relief stuff, but more rebuilding, reconstructing, and long-term process. So that's what we would need. I can connect definitely, but yeah, we need to coordinate much better.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving us an update and kind of a glimpse of what's happened, what Jesus has been doing in and through you and the churches. Sounds like the body of Christ has been very active, and ways that others watching and listening can get involved. I know our family, we're going to be down there during the Thanksgiving or just right before. So you've got 3 able bodies who are ready to be put to work. So if you know people needing helpers, we're coming down, and we've already got a place to stay, and we're ready to roll up our sleeves, as I'm sure others are waiting and watching to pray. Let me just ask real fast as we close tonight. Greg and David, if people want to get in contact with you, maybe to find ways to help, to serve, share your contact information, or who should they contact?
Well, I would say if they want to come to Houston and help, contact David, because the number of people that he's working with that are pastors and know people that are in the city of Houston that really are in many ways underserved, that would be the place to go, I would think.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Greg, for that recommendation. I can share my contact information. David Kim, DABIDKIM at Glocal Mission, GLOCAL mission.org. Or my phone number is 713-494-3127. 713-494-3127. Or anyone can check localmission.org and they can contribute or they can contact me and so that we can coordinate whatever we can do together.
Awesome. Hey, well, thank you both. And please know, I know you're not doing it for attaboys, but thank you for being the presence of Jesus in your communities and there in Houston. Thank you for being on with this webinar tonight. And I know it was a huge blessing, and I'm sure it's going to be for those who view it or have been viewing it. And please know you are all in our prayers, both you individually and your communities of faith in the city of Houston. And we want to thank everybody who joined us for this webinar tonight. And this is definitely something for us to think about, not just how we can continue to help those impacted by Harvey there in Houston, or Irma in Florida, or Maria in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, but also as we think about moving out into our communities, even before disasters hit, how we can be a good neighbor to connect with our neighbors, to love, serve, and bless them in order to connect them to Jesus. And before they know about his love, they need to know how much we care. And that's a great witness and a great open door. And we can do that not when disasters hit, but we can begin that beforehand. And God's richest blessings to everybody. And as always, remember, let's keep Jesus central. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye. Blessings.
Thank you.